My name is Laura. Today we have a dear guest in our Entre, Nous segment. He is Casey Jones. He is a member and volunteer of the amazing movement of happiness. And as I do in every interview, I let our guest introduce himself. Hi, Casey. Thank you for being here. I would like you to introduce yourself to all our friends who are watching.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for inviting me to Entre Nous. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I feel very fortunate. And I loved the interview with my friend Gaston. It was beautiful. Yeah. So that was, and then it sparked up a nice conversation between us again. And we haven't spoken since Cartagena a year ago. So it was really good, and it even worked us toward working together again. So I shouldn't say again, but working together in our new ventures. But so for most of you who won't know, about a year ago, I started a nomadic journey, which I, with a lot of fun and heartfelt energy, created with inspiration also from Tal Ben Shahar and Yuval, his president at HSA. We are calling it the world's first nomadic happiness center. And so I love to think that I'm not only satisfying my own curiosity and openness for learning, but I'm also bringing joy, energy, and service to the world. So I spent the first year, I started, not ironically, intentionally, at an HSA retreat in Cartagena, Colombia, and then I didn't even know whether I was going to take the return flight to Costa Rica or stay in Colombia. And I was trying to that's part of my journey. I'm letting go and letting it flow and not making too many plans and not attaching to outcomes. But it took me on a great adventure. I ended up going to Nicaragua to a tantric yoga community, and then to another wellness retreat in Costa Rica for 3 months. But I've spent the whole last year in Central America, with the exception that the last 3 months have been in Oaxaca, Mexico, which I've enjoyed thoroughly and got involved on a volunteer level with a local program called the Oaxaca Learning Center. Anyway, and unexpectedly, I'm heading back to the States to help my son open a business before returning to launch my second year with another HSA retreat in Mexico City. And so that's a little brief on my story of where I'm at, but I'm basically on the search. I've defined it as a vision quest where I'm celebrating connections, community, and co-creation. And that's me.
Oh, that's wonderful, Casey. And we might meet in Mexico in person.
I hope that happens. That will be wonderful.
I'm trying to go. Thank you one more time, Casey. And now we go straight to our questions. Casey, what motivated your decision to reinvent yourself in the second half of your life? In your HSA blog on spirituality and happiness, you mentioned a conscious awakening to new possibilities. How did your perception of life change after this moment?
Laura, this was a very amazing transformation of not only reevaluating who I had become in my life, but also this epiphany, this moment of self-awareness where I realized I was highly disappointed in who I had become and a lot of choices that I made. And I felt like I had was squandering some great opportunities, and it came at a horrible, difficult cost. The cost was a 35-year marriage, but which we navigated the space over the course of a year to end with loving kindness, and which was quite a challenge. But I'll refer to specifically the dark nights of the soul in a Jungian fashion, which I went through. And I was in some deep meditation and weekend healing retreats, and I was literally laying on my side, getting some energy work, kind of in a fetal position. And it just came to me, this realization that everything that I had become, everything that I thought that I was no longer, and that it was gone, and it blew up in a million pieces. And my ego, the feeling is your ego dies, and they call it ego death, when in actuality it paves the way for rebirth and rising. And so that's what I experienced. And it's a very, that's why I jumped on the spiritual and happiness blog opportunity. But also keeping in tune with Jung, he talks that we are born 3 times, of course, from our mother's womb. Then as our ego in society informs us, of who we should be, and then we agree with that, and we make some unwritten contract to say, yes, I am going to become that person. This is what I'm going to do, and whether it aligns with our soul or not. And then ultimately, there's the birth of consciousness. When you wake up and you say, I'm not just me, individual on an island. I'm part of a greater whole. I'm part of this unity. And I was given the opportunity to, in a Joseph Campbellian way, answer the call to my higher self, and just maybe, because I'm a hopeless romantic, I put it in terms of, I'm going to go on, I'm accepting the call, I'm going on my hero's journey.
Perfect.
So how did it change the perception of my life? Exactly that. I was no longer going to live a lie. I was no longer going to be unhappy. I was armed for, at that point in time, 6 years of training from Tal Ben-Shahar in positive psychology and this and science of happiness. And oh my gosh, I knew better. I just got to that point where I would no longer tolerate not rising to my higher, better self, so that I could play my small role in helping humanity achieve its potential. So starting with me first.
That's wonderful. Then it's how Tal Ben-Shahar work influence your journey towards happiness and personal growth, right? And which of the whole being principles have had the most profound impact on you?
I think about that a lot, Laura, and my first out is to say, oh, well, my gosh, it's an upward spiral that's a reinforcing loop, as Tal teaches us. And of course it is. But I do have 2 favorites, 4 favorites, and 6 that influence me every day. And of course, they have ramifications on the other 6. But I'll start with, his first principle, his whole being principle, before he gets into the 5 spiral elements, is that the aim of life is and ought to be whole person well-being. I wanted to become, I was always this person who was a mile wide and an inch deep. I wasn't deep in my learnings. I was a jack of all trades, master of none. Well, as my nephew once said to me, he says, well, Uncle Casey, don't worry. It's the generalists that survive in Darwinism. And so I always thought that was kind of funny, because I was such a generalist, and I still am. And I'm being true to myself by continuing my broad levels of interest. So let's go jump into spirituality, intellectual, and relational too. So spirituality, a purposeful life is a spiritual life. And that's his first principle. And the second is that the ordinary is elevated to the extraordinary through mindful presence. So one of the phrases, Laura, that I use now is my passion path to present purpose. So the present purpose encapsulates spirituality, Tal's teachings of spirituality, by being mindfully present with a purpose. My Eastern philosophies inform me to say, okay, I'm engaged on a path of setting goals. I even like the term soul setting, aligning it with my soul. and my higher self, but without attachment to outcome. I'm no longer obsessed with what's going to happen tomorrow, and trying to control things that I can't, which releases us to be more mindfully present.
Exactly.
So even though later today I'm in a Hay House writers boot camp, I'm not focused on that like I would have been in my earlier days. I'm saying, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful to be here with Laura and having this conversation. It's a beautiful experience, and I'm just so grateful for it. So that takes us through the spirituality. Now the intellectual part, which I didn't. Before I started my journey, I was deciding, okay, I'm going to be true to myself. I'm going on this nomadic journey. I haven't traveled the world enough. I'm fascinated by other cultures. I also want to take up my role in the happiness revolution. So what are the two intellectual principles? Curiosity and openness to new experience. And that defines what I'm doing by going to these different cultures. But I'm not being, in typical fashion, certainly by American standards. Heck, we have 2, maybe 4 weeks split up over the year, but our cultural immersions are 1 day of travel, 5 days immersed, and 1 day to fly home. And that's not immersion. So there's a new term in nomadic world called slow madding. And so that's what I'm doing. That's why I've been in Oaxaca for 3 months, to have a slow cultural immersion, work a little bit on my Spanish skills, not enough yet, but they're getting there. And then, the second intellectual principle I referred to earlier when I said I'm a mile wide, an inch deep. And Tall teaches us that engaging in deep learning fulfills our potential as rational animals. And the fact that we have our imaginations, and that I love Tall's teachings when he says, don't get the top 10 or more books on a subject, get the best 2 or 3, read them, and then teach them. And that's, the best way to become deeper and more engaged in deep learning. And then finally, very, very important, because a lot of my life, I struggled with imposter syndrome, and this, I could write a book on how to squander an Ivy League education, so to speak. And that I became a person who never thought I belonged, who, that's the imposter syndrome, which turned into self-loathing and anger issues, that, the fact that I ever even said anything harshly to my wife, is a horrible thing to live with. We had a great relationship mostly. In the end, we realized we didn't inspire each other anymore, and that it was better off for us to go separate ways. But and again, loving kindness was a very important part of that. But so that's those things, those particular principles of Tall's teachings are the ones that are part of my daily ritual. I remind myself in the morning, I remind myself at the end of the night when I do my gratitude and intentions for the day, and I go out before I do a priming of my subconscious at the end of the day. But I remind myself every day of Tall's teachings. Thank you for the question.
That's amazing. Yes, Tal teaches us to emphasize the connection between mindfulness and purpose, right? And you were telling me about Mexico City, and you're going to have a talk, right?
That is what is called in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. That's called the presumptive close. I am submitting my proposal, and ironically, in that term of in the thought of gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting the term, but thank you for allowing me to. But it's not procrastination. I was having a Freudian slip. I couldn't think of anything other than constipation, which is related. I was just going, it's not constipation.
But it's almost the same, right?
It is. So that's rather funny how the mind works. But so procrastination. But Robert Biswas Diener had us a great teaching where he gets a person to reframe. If you are a person that thinks you procrastinate, but in actuality, it's working in your subconscious. You're working on solutions in your subconscious. Yeah. That's a form of incubation. So literally one of my essays is the 40-year incubation. So my whole adult life, I've been incubating to become, well, I'm gonna borrow from Meg Nocera, one of our peers who wrote the wonderful book, a memoir called The Butterfly Awakens. So in the terms of the chrysalis of going inward and being cocooned and then coming out, I had a 40-year incubation.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I don't know if I got off track.
Oh, don't worry. That's amazing. Casey, you've mentioned the experience of a dark night of the soul. Could you describe how this experience was for you and how it helped you redefine your purpose and direction in life?
Yes, absolutely. So being in the dark night of the soul is like having my experience. Carl Jung wrote beautifully in what's called the Red Book on his personal experience. And so I was informed by that. So when I was literally calling it in, I was asking my angels and guides and ancestors and source, help me understand what I'm supposed to be doing. My heart is in the right place. Why is this? But first, I had to have this movie replay of my life that devolved from the grandiosity of my imagined Hollywood happy ending to a Greek tragedy to the long Russian winter of discontent. It was painful. And I witnessed all of the things that I regretted in my past that I've done, whether it's wrongs to others, wrongs to myself. I consider myself a person of high honesty, integrity, ethics, and morals. But we're all human, and I have made mistakes in life. And as I alluded to, if anything I ever did in my life other than encourage my wife to answer the call of her muse, because she's one of the most creative talents I've ever met. But in my desperation to go through all these different idolizations to tough love to get her going, I realized was more from my ego, and I needed to turn it around on myself, because when you're pointing at someone else, three are pointing back at you. And that's a euphemistic way of looking at the dark night of the soul. I can't tell you how deep the grieving was. I've never grieved like that through the loss of my grandparents, my parents, which I've had. So I've had grieving in my life. But this is a different level where every cell in your body is just being blown up, and every image and thought you had of what you had created, the ego of yourself, it's all shattered into a million pieces. And I literally had a person doing energy healing, a little bit of Reiki and hands-on touch on my calf. And I started viscerally, convulsively crying to such a level. And she was such an empath. She also started crying to mirror that. That's the depth of the pain and the experience of my personal dark night of the soul. And I didn't come through it that night. And I had a couple more experiences in deep meditation. Yoga Nidra is another place. So Yoga Nidra is a practice where you go into this world between dream state and reality, and you work on your samskaras to kind of help alleviate these pains from the past that we let our subconscious brain control our daily existence.
Yeah.
But that's the freeing process that allows for the rebirth, to redefine yourself, to find the courage to really go deep, find out, determine what my strengths, values, and passions are, so that I could effectively reinvent myself. I hope that's a good explanation.
Yeah, that's a wonderful explanation. Casey, you have mentioned several influential figures like Lao Tzu, Eckhart Tolle, and Thich Nhat Hanh. How have their teachings influenced your spiritual journey? Is there any specific lesson or quote that deeply resonates with you?
Oh, yes. I will tell you that part of my morning ritual, 4 cardinal principles, the 4 agreements, the Stoic 4 virtues, things like that. With Lao Tzu, for me specifically, I kind of commune with him in a morning ritual. And Lao Tzu, they don't even know whether it was one individual master or the accumulation of several over years, because his existence predated until he wrote down the Tao Te Ching. It was all spoken word. But I will say specifically, water as a symbol of being, that you are humble enough to take the low spot and take the lowest spot, yet strong enough to carve the rocks in the river. So it's humility with strength. So that speaks to me. Wu Wei, which is the non-striving, effortless action. Wu Wei every day. And I have a term I call Fu Wu, which is future Wu. And it's like I try to say, okay, how will I be in the future? How will I bring it in? So when we think of deja vu, that's how I kind of came up with that woo vu. But I say FU because it's future, short for future. But Eckhart Tolle, the power of now, between his and John Kabat-Zinn's teachings. In fact, next early spring, I'm taking the MBSR, John Kabat's mindfulness training. So Eckhart Tolle, Thich Nhat Hanh, the spiritual purpose of service, his book, No Mud, No Lotus, helped me kind of bring into perspective that I had to go through all this pain so that I could blossom through my divine purpose. Where to go? And different influences. I think of Rumi's quote.
That's a wonderful quote.
There's 2 of his that I quote often. But yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. And I'm going to restate that, if you don't mind. But yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I am changing myself. I love that. And I try to think of that every day. Every time I start to think that I'm going to judge someone else or I'm trying to control something, I just come back on the inward journey. But as far as my nomadic travels, like Neil Donald Walsh, life begins outside your comfort zone. I love that. So there's more, but that's probably good.
Yeah, those are amazing. And Casey, how did you discover your life purpose after your spiritual awakening? What step did you take to align yourself with that purpose?
I'll tell you, Laura, I'm so grateful, and probably would not have happened without Tal Ben-Shahar's teachings. Like I say, I was armed at that point with 6 years. I had my certification in positive psychology. I had my positive psychology coaching certification. And then I was currently at that time of my dark nights of the soul. And I don't think there's a coincidence. It happened. I mean, it's not just an odd happenstance. It happened because it was all meant to be. But I was in the middle of the happiness studies training in the certification with Tall. So I'm going back through the things that I had learned with a slightly different twist. And it's just like rereading a classic book. You know, you learn different things as you go through it. But I knew I had created for my own eventual practice, because I hadn't started practicing yet. But I knew that I had to line up my Venn diagram of strengths, values, and passions and find that overlap. I wasn't raised with a strong father figure. I wasn't taught, I wasn't steeped in stoic values or any values. Now, I had some decent role models, and my mother was a beautiful role model, but on goodness, just general goodness, but not deep philosophy. She didn't have time for it. My gosh, she had to provide for a family and 4 children, and she did it wonderfully. So, you know, and I was armed with the permission to be human from Tal. Tal's reminder of us from Sir Francis Bacon that, you know, to command nature, we have to obey it. So I just kept diving deeper and deeper and pulling back the layers. There's a Zen-based Satori practice that is called different things, but it's basically an inward self-analysis called Who Is In. And it's like, who am I? Who am I? Who is the observer watching this? And you step outside of yourself and you look at yourself, and then you say, how do I want to present to the world? What do I want to become? What do I want to experience on this heaven on earth that we have, this one-time opportunity? Now, reincarnation may or may not have been proven through quantum physics, but it's all we absolutely can know right now is that this is our one journey. Now, do I believe that there are other journeys? I do believe that the consciousness outlives the physical body. I absolutely believe that. And it's a good book. I can't remember the author's title now, but it's called Why Buddhism is True. But again, I'm not a dogmatic person. I don't ascribe to one particular religion. I let several philosophies inform how I present to the world. But this deep dive into inward dive, soul searching, is what informed me on what I needed to do. I needed to experience the world. I needed to continue my learnings, and I needed to assume my role in the happiness revolution.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's how we did it.
Your purpose of life, right? You mentioned that the journey, not the destination, defines your happiness. How do you apply this philosophy in your daily life? Would you share an example of how you stay present and focus on the process rather than the goal?
Oh, I think of this great example right now. So this is part of my experience at Pachamama, the eco wellness retreat in Costa Rica. So, and part of my teachings, I rely on the new science of peak performance aging, which I prefer to the word transformation and peak potential transformation. But how I let that inform me is staying mindfully present. So I'm happy in this moment of, I finished my first yoga teacher training, 100 hours in restorative yoga and meditation. And it was a beautiful experience. But I knew that I was performing on stage that night in just a couple hours. And we had only played the song 3 times, only once with the 6 full members that were going to be in the band on stage. And so I'm going to play the djembe, my African and Brazilian drumming. And yet I took a moment, I almost took off, and I stayed. And then one of the beautiful souls had this cool thing she did with the camera, and we captured everyone in the group jumping in and jumping out. And it's just something that we have now for perpetuity, that just is a wonderful reminder of the joy that we all experience of learning together and going on that deep dive together. And And I would not, the former me would not have done that. I would have ran off to go get some beats in and be ready to perform. And so that's one way. And so then on my way, I also talked myself off the cliff of panic that I wasn't going to be any good. These other people are real musicians. My imposter syndrome was coming back up to the surface. And I said, the drum is beautiful and it makes beautiful sounds. And I have good rhythm. I can't go on great djembe solos and impress the world, but I can keep the beat with our drummer in the band and accentuate what the lead guitarist is doing. I can do that. And I calm myself down, did a little vagus nerve. Interaction. And then I showed up and then I had a couple of friends and they were going to record it. And I didn't worry. Normally I would overmanage this situation, but I didn't. I just said, just record it. Well, thank goodness she did a horrible job, but I had another friend over there with a better angle and he recorded it. And then the whole event became not just our 6 band members, but it was the finale for this concert we did with 180, 200 people in this little, nice little kind of amphitheater setting with tiered steps and stuff. And I just enjoyed this moment knowing that in early February, I had knocked out 2 of my 3 goals for the year, which was to finish yoga teacher training, play the djembe on stage, and I'm still working on the speaking Spanish fluently. But that's how I can mindfully provide my service of self, which helps me take my role in the happiness revolution.
That's wonderful. Casey, now that you're living a nomadic lifestyle, right? How has this affect your sense of community and connection? What have you learned from the communities you've visited?
Well, thank you. That's a very thoughtful question because I will share now that my son is my teacher and he helped inspire me. He started traveling. He won a scholarship to go to China as a junior in high school. At the age of 16, he left home. And it was difficult on both my wife and I, but we had to let him go to grow. And it was an amazing experience. And I wasn't the most traveled person, but I knew this in my heart. I said, son, you're going to get along with 80% of the people out there. It's the 10% on either extreme that are so consumed with passion, with their commitment to their dogmas of what they believe, that they exclude people and that they force people away. When you feel that energy, protect yourself and go away from it and focus on all the good in the world. And that wisdom that I shared that I didn't really know from an embodied experience, I now know because, Laura, that's exactly what I've experienced. One of the at the Oaxaca Learning Centers, the director asked me after I gave my workshop there, which was an amazing experience. But he said, what's your, he wanted to know the difference between America now and Mexico now. And I said, wow, first of all, the youth of Mexico have a higher happiness quotient for their future beliefs. Mexico is on the rise. Whereas America, the overall feeling is being depressed and it's on the decline. And I said, what I love that I've seen in the Mexican culture, the families are tighter. The communities are tighter. There is so much love to see teenagers, walking hand in hand with their parents. Just brings such joy. In America, that's like, oh God, don't touch me. I won't be cool. What will my friends think if they see me holding my parents' hands? Things like that. But also, and that's speaking of just my Mexican experience, but I also experienced that in Guatemala. I also experienced that briefly. I had a brief but beautiful 24 hours in El Salvador, and to see the rise and that country from going from one of the most dangerous, the dangerous in Central America, one of the most dangerous in the world, to the safest, where there's a movement to make the president of El Salvador the president of all of Central America, like as in an EU formation of a collective of Central America. So that's another interesting observation. But that's part of why I was drawn to Latin America to begin with. I had been asked to go down and facilitate, co-facilitate, and speak at a retreat in Brazil. And it was with Enrique Bueno. I think we spoke of him, but he's a teacher now in Tall's master's program. But I just got that, to borrow from Costa Rica's famous expression, pura vida, the pure life, the good life. I experienced that. And also affirmation of the happiness studies that have revealed that a lot of people in the world with a lot less can be happy, are happy, and they exude that in their existence. They create their own form of blue zone. And anyway, that's what I've seen on my nomadic journey, and I can't wait to continue. So now next I'm going to South America and different parts, lesser traveled parts of Europe, and then Southeast Asia and India. That's kind of right now my tentative, but I'm leaving it open.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. You'll enjoy very, very much. And one culture completely different to the other one, because if you go to India, or the Southeast Asia, it's amazing what you're going to leave, when you go there, what you're going to learn of those culture. And Latin American culture, it's hugging and kissing and parents and grandparents and family and food.
Oh, perfect. Yes. Oh, food. But when you said that, the kissing and hugging, Anna, who's from Brazil and in the HSA, she was in the first MA cohort. But she would leave me voice messages and always end with the mwah, mwah. And I was just like, you have no idea how much that warms my heart every time you do that. And I love it because in my family, I know my mother loved me, but she never once in her life was able to tell me that she loved me. I don't remember her hugging me, but she did. It's just our culture didn't allow that to happen. But I would like to end or add a philosophical belief system that I brought in that allowed me to let go of my former self. And the simple words, let it go, let it flow, which allowed me to stop trying to control things that I could not, to stop judging others, this radical form of acceptance, and not trying to overplan everything and control all this, but just to come from a more open-hearted space that allowed the beauty of the world to come into me. So
that's so nice, Casey. And how do you see your spiritual evolution in the future, Casey? Are there any new practices or philosophies you plan to explore on your journey?
I'm not going to do him justice. There's actually this famous physicist. He's Italian, Fabrizio Fagin, I think is his name. I want to learn more about him. I heard him on a podcast, and he said, my whole life and started, and he's been in physics for 40, 50 years, but his whole life started from 3D physics and in materialism, immersed in materialism. And now with the advent of quantum physics and the acceptance that things that come into the material world come from a whole nother realm of non-existence, that atoms are 99% nothing. Yet the table that I'm looking at, this laptop that I'm looking at, are all condensed of atoms. They're 99% space. So how does that inform? I want to follow him and others like him that are marrying spirituality with with three-dimensional living. So one of the things that I said on my journey, about my journey, is that I'm trading material experiences, material accumulation for experiential accumulation, which kind of tells you what I mean. But really, it's my spiritual evolution is summarized by these three words: to go from seeking to seeing to being.
Mhm.
But just like, because of tall, I immediately think of the upward self-reinforcing loop of whole being, because we'll always be lifelong learners. So I'll always be seeking in a sense, but I'll also be able to step out ahead of the suffering, because pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice.
A choice.
So rather than to be mired in why is this happening to me, to be embodied the why is this happening for me? What is my lesson to learn in this particular challenge, so that I can rise again to a higher self, and ultimately, Laura, to being where I embody that. I've already had a couple of amazing, I will preface this statement with, I am no one's master. I will never be anybody's guru. We are all each other's teachers. Like Tal is so gracious to include us as his fellow journeyers, and we're all each other's teachers, and we're all each other's students. And that is the deepest part of my philosophy. But that being, to have, I've had attracted people who've asked me to be their spiritual father, their spiritual brother, their Pancha Papa, as I was called by a couple of young people at Pancha Mama. And two people told me, I'm this collective healer. You're definitely this close to becoming a master. And I'm like, what does that mean? I'm trying to master myself. And they said, that's why. So it's the humility. It's moving forward with a deeper understanding of the purpose of moving humanity forward, without a shred of arrogance about it. It's just humility, 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 and just playing a small role by starting with me first.
That's wonderful. It's where we all should start, right? With us.
It helps. It's a fast forward
Yes.
off ramp to self-help.
You share one of the experience that you had in Costa Rica. I don't know why I keep saying Puerto Rico, but and you say, when I wrote Puerto Rico, you said, Laura, I haven't visited Puerto Rico. And I was like, no, it's not Puerto Rico, it's Costa Rica, right? And you mentioned the experience of, when you finish your yoga teacher training, and also playing the drum. Do you have, or can you share another particular experience during your time at the Eco Retreat in Costa Rica that significantly impacted your personal growth?
Yes. I'll tell you, one night we were doing this all-night sacred ceremony where we're all dancing by a fireplace, and they're literally, they have two fire masters, and they're using the coals, the embers, and they're pulling them out to make shapes of hummingbirds, dragonflies, and it was all just so inspiring. But to just be dancing ecstatically in that moment, and I had a shaman come up to me and just share with me that I was a powerful energy healer. And I was like, wow. So, the first week I was there, what a transformation. That was less than a month. So how much transcendence and transformation can happen in such a short amount of time really blew my mind, because for perspective, in my first week, I was sitting there going, man, I'm one of the older people here. I'm too old to be here. I don't belong. I'm not woo enough. I'm not, like spiritual enough. I'm not this. And I said, well, why did you come here? And I reminded myself, I came here to heal myself. I need to turn inward and look inward. And so I started, they have 2 yoga practices a day there as part of the community. There's a nightly 45-minute silent meditation. And those started allowing me to, again, my introduction to yoga nidra, that I was able to peel away these painful layers that didn't serve me anymore. And I was able to let it go and let it flow, coming back to that. And it was so empowering that all of a sudden it opened my heart, and apparently that made me it attracted people to come to me, to ask me questions about what I was doing and share my story. And likewise, I had learned through Tal's teachings and my positive psychology coaching, I had become an empathic listener, and I listened to their stories and absorbed them and learned from them. And so I think in general, that's probably the most impactful teachings, is that I realize that there's so much room for transformation and transcendence. And that once you come from here and here, so your heart and your intuition, and retrain your brain to control it instead of letting it, the expression is, the brain is a horrible master, but a wonderful servant when we train it well. I was learning these things.
In your role as a transformation guide and lifestyle mentor, right? How do you combine ancient wisdom with the new science of peak performance and happiness?
Thank you for asking me this one, because I could talk about it for the rest of my life. I don't know why or when I came. I think I was impressed by Tal, and I was like, wow, Tal talks about Lao Tzu as being one of his teachers, and he talks about the ancient Greeks, and yes, and Buddha. I'm like, I'm loving this. And Jesus, it's just like him calling in the masters allowed me to step into the philosophies that I had wanted to. I had dipped my toes in my early 20s, but it got me back on that deep dive. And so then along the ways, so now I have happiness studies, and somewhere along the line, and then came in through another side door, the peak performance aging new science. And so I started to say, meet me at the intersection of ancient wisdom and progressive sciences. So, but I do have an important delineation. I really believe in my heart, and I look forward to having this conversation with Tal someday, that sciences are not the leading indicators, but the lagging indicators. When you talk about religions or philosophies, you could quickly divide a crowd. But if you bring in science, you have a better chance of uniting the crowd, a bigger group, to listen to the message. But I look at it as a lagging indicator because I don't think that science, it discovers new stuff for us in our current existence. But these are universal truths and axioms that already exist. Thus, Bruce Lipton proving the Hermetic principles through quantum physics. It's just an exciting perspective for me. And I think it's more informative. It's more expansive. It's more, there's more depth in it that informs us as we seek our divine purpose.
Casey, what do you believe is the most important for people seeking to reinvent themselves in the second half of their lives?
Yeah. That brings me back to the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's when you start listening to the voice in your head that has been telling you your whole life why you're uncomfortable here, why you don't belong here, why you didn't have this success, why life isn't more of what you had wanted. And when you accept the fact that it's because your higher self and your soul are telling you, because this is not where you're supposed to be. You have a purpose. And there are those who will say, it's our mission, our personal mission, to accept that goal of finding, defining, and refining our soul's purpose, so that we can rise to our higher self and actualize our divine purpose. But I think that's what the most important thing is, for people to go inward and say, why am I not happy? What do I really want to do? And to go on that inward journey that will propel them forward to a better future.
Will you tell us more about the Peak Potential Transformation Guide.com, the platform and the recovery, reinvention, and redemption programs you offer, and how they help people find a higher purpose?
Yes, I'm so grateful for not only this community and the great thought leaders out there that have informed me to align my interests and passions to help people. But so what I realized about myself, and what I'm going to share with others, is that I had to recover from societal conditioning. I had to reinvent myself, which happens to be what one of my friends said, that's your superpower, because 7 times in my life I've reinvented myself, which can be good. It was good for me. It could, sometimes it slows your growth. And in the long time, in that incubation that I referred to, it ultimately catapulted me forward to this spot where we are all now. But in the experience, the dark nights of my soul, the depths of self-evaluation, from a more heartfelt place of learning, as opposed to the ramifications of self-judgment, self-incrimination, and judgment against myself. But you say, well, okay, if I died tomorrow, who's coming to my funeral? And what are they going to say about me? And I wasn't happy with what I was thinking in 2020. I knew I was on the right path, but I had to continue to develop it. And that's what this last 4 years has been about. So now, in the recovery that I teach from societal conditioning, is really about rebalancing yourself and saying, I'm okay as I am. I had to go through and accepting the past as your learning that informs you where you are today, which helps you then say, okay, what do I want to be? So the reinvention part is aligning yourself with your strengths, values, passions, to accept that deep, deep surrender, and then of the recovery, to propel yourself to the strength and courage to say, okay, if I can imagine it, it can happen. But to keep it within the reality of what Tal says. Yes, stretch goals. So it's where we're at now, but we've got to have these stretch goals. How can I stretch myself, which keeps me engaged, which helps me continue my learning, and then arrive to my own personal platform. All my programs are customized for individuals, but there's a general overlay, but all customized. And to get to that point where, and I only ask the questions, all my clients have the right answers that inform them. I just have to ask them the questions that get them to realize with confidence that of a new direction that's more in line with their higher self. But ultimately, that, without attachment to outcome, that informs the rewriting of our legacies, so that we redeem our character and move forward into a life of service. It all, it's surrender, strength, and service. It all ends up in service. Instead of servicing my ego, servicing myself, accumulating all these things to have some sort of, win some sort of medals for, I got this, I got that, so my people that I know can look at me and say, oh yeah, he's all that. That stuff is meaningless to me anymore. I still have goals. I still want community, connections, and I want to inspire others. But probably the best day of my life was when I realized I was better off serving others than serving myself.
Perfect. What does the concept of a traveling happiness center mean to you? And how do you integrate it into your daily life while traveling?
The beautiful thing is that reinforces the principles that I follow.
Yeah.
So being a traveling happiness center is on a very primary level. I hope that I'm playing a role in creating a new image of what most people in other cultures think of Americans as, because there is an image of Americans as being rude and aloof, ignorant of cultures, ignoring and not respecting other people's cultures. So that reminds me to stay mindfully present and respectful of cultures in the moment, to have my curiosity open to the new experience. And just by going through the Spire elements and remembering, sharing gratitude, joy, and love, it truly is contagious. And people sometimes look at me funny, like, what are you all happy about? And I try not to do it where, like Tal says, we're not in the happy clappy club. You don't walk around all day, but it's a combination of being intrigued in the learning, happy and joyful in the moment of sharing community and cultural experiences, and food. Very fun. So that to me, sharing Tal's teachings in general in an embodied way, the fact that I reclaim my health, that I have a happier, open mindset, that I don't know everything. I'm not here to tell everybody how they should live their lives. I'm here to lead my best life and learn from others leading their best.
Perfect. Casey, on your site, adventurereach.com, you share your love for cultural exploration. What kind of content do you plan to offer, and what do you hope people take away from this experience?
Wow. First of all, it's going to be a process that cultivates it, and the audience that I find will help me refine it. But right now, my broad scope is, so for instance, I look up across at a UNESCO site. So I'm really intrigued by the UNESCO sites of the world and national parks, and surrounding myself in nature and deep cultural learning. So I'm across from the Zapotec ruins at Monte Alban, here outside of Oaxaca. And I could see the pyramids. And as the sun sets behind me, they turn this golden brown sandstone color against all the greenery around it. It's soul inspiring. But so it's kind of a soul inspiring way of sharing my experiences, whether it's the Gala Getza that is a week-long plus experience here in Oaxaca. The Independence Day is coming. I'm going to miss Dia de los Muertos, which I've always wanted to. My birthday is November 1st. I wanted to do this once in Mexico, but I have the joy of going home to be with my son. But I also do things like Zen videos, I call them, but just little tranquil settings. And it might just be the waves of the beach at the change of tides, where it's just a slow lapping of the water or a trickle of a creek. And those are other things. It might be the joy of the group at the end of my the 2-day, the 10-hour workshop that I did for the Oaxaca Learning Center, and having this group of young, bright minds that were so inspiring, and they hugged me. And it's just like that moment. I hope I think of that on my deathbed. I want to find what I call societal solution seekers in local motion. So in the realm of these are terms I made up, but in the terms of think global, act locally, I want to find the people that are sacrificing material accumulation for community betterment. That's kind of part of, so for instance, the director I met at the Oaxaca Learning Center is one example. Several of the teachers at a tantra yoga community, things like that, people that are giving of themselves to make the world a better place, a happier, healthier place of whole being.
Amazing. Casey, we are in our last question. And what advice would you give to someone considering leaving their conventional life to follow a path similar to yours as a global nomad?
Wow. For some people, it's easier in the sense that they think, okay, I really have always wanted to go to Bolivia and Chile. I'll use your examples. And that's what I want to do. And it's easy. For someone like me, where I want to go everywhere, where am I going to go first? Some of it was informed by the results of happiness studies that a lot of Latin cultures are happy. The Pura Vida of Costa Rica, the community, the happiness, the food, the cultural depth, the music, all these things. But really, it's a matter of refining what your preferences are, because I'm also want to go to Southeast Asia and spend a couple of years and go to the Himalayas and learn from some yogi masters. I mean, it's just like, I want to do all of this, but you have to start somewhere. So I did a little research. Doesn't take as much. We're born into an amazing age. The technology, even the things I forgot to do before I left. Oh, thank goodness we have these little computers in our hands, and we can learn on the road. And so it doesn't take as much knowledge and research as you think. It doesn't even take as much money as you think. Trust me, I was so tempted to take a couple of different jobs and sink back into this mediocre middle-class life of a lack of self-fulfilling expression of myself, to bring myself the world. And the reward I got, Laura, was I've lived 3 lifetimes in a year. And so I say, a little money, a little research, and a big leap of faith. And I launched on my Instagram that I have just personal. I don't have my Adventure Rich Instagram up, but I'm on a 12-meter, so 40-foot platform, 12-meter platform at the edge of Lake Atitlan, outside of a spiritual community, San Marcos. And I told people, I just looked at the camera and I said, people have asked me, what does it take to sell everything you own, take up a nomadic life with no particular destination known? And I said, it takes a little money, a little research, and a giant leap of faith. And I turn around and jump off this, and perfectly unscripted, this French guy starts going, ooh la la, he just started rapping in French. And the fact that it took him several seconds to say that before I hit the water emphasized the height of the jump. But it was very fun. But that's it. It's like you follow your heart, follow your heart, follow your heart. If you're not happy doing what you're doing, remember what Einstein said, no problem was ever solved with the same mindset that created it. Change your mindset and change your perspective of what you look at, and the world will change before your eyes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Casey, for this insightful interview. I wish you all the best in this new path, and may you continue to inspire many. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you, Laura. I am very grateful. Continued success on your wonderful podcast. And thanks again for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.